everybody. My name is Luke Sullivan, and I wrote Hey Whipple, Squeeze This, now it's in 6th edition. And today we're gathered together 5 advertising authors, and we're going to talk about that book and ways that you can do better work and maybe help you get into the industry. So let's begin.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us all together and for writing Hey Whipple. I think actually none of us would probably have written. I can speak for myself, but I'll speak for everyone. None of us would have written our books if it wasn't for you. You sort of were the one who kicked it all off, and I actually don't think anyone would be surprised that I was heavily influenced with my book but not just that, but actually my career. I was switched majors in college after reading Hey Whipple, Squeeze This. So first off, do you want to publicly apologize to me for this, or is that more of a private thing?
That's a private.
But like I was saying, we all had your book to look to. What was the thing that made you want to write your book? What made you crazy enough to think that you should put this thing out into the world?
Here's how it started. I gave a speech to the Portfolio Center in Atlanta, back in '97. And I didn't want to go down there and just put on here's the agency reel from Fallon, look at all those great spots, have a few questions, and then hop on the plane. I wanted to help the students. To this day, we all want to help the students. All of us here, we want to help students get into the business and do better work. So I didn't come with a full speech, and it's kind of easy to write in a modular style. So I just came in with, well, try this, and try this, and try this. They were on slides back then, And I had a handout that had all these 70, 80 pieces of advice. I was told later, 3 weeks later, did you know your handout is now a screensaver somewhere? And I looked at that, wow, that's cool. And then eventually, Ad Age picked it up as an article, and it turned into their most requested reprint up till the time anyway. And I realized, wow, there's a hunger for no bullshit, no edict, no Moses tablets, how to do advertising, but just some advice from somebody who gives a shit, who can talk to you like you're a person and suggest, wow, this really is a good business, and that the crap I used to grow up with Mr. Whipple is crap.
Please don't squeeze the Charmin.
But Mr. Whipple, this new Charmin bathroom tissue is so soft, so squeezably soft.
Mrs. Logan.
Charmin is so deep down, squeezably soft, it's irresistible. Mr. Whipple.
And you can do great stuff in this business. So thanks, Thomas, for that question. That's how it started.
I've got a question. I think I would maybe start off with just having you read this out loud and comment on it.
I love it. This is so bad. Yes, I love it. This is so great. So 1 star, meh. Well, for an online marketing class for local JC, I didn't care for the author's style of writing. It was a chore to read the weekly assignments. There were no assignments. Well. Let's hit the report abuse button.
So, Luke, the new edition has such a mountain of amazing advice, ideas, tips for getting the job. And I think it's probably harder than ever to get that first one today. When I think back through the mists of time to looking for my own first one, there was such a simple, clear definition of where to look, and that was the top agencies.
Nancy, that's you and I we're the same era, mists of time and all. And what we did is we cracked open the last year's edition of the One Show annual, which lists all the best work in the world and names the agencies. CA, Communication Arts, the December issue, has also the advertising best in the world. That's how you did it. You go where the great work's being produced. And I happen to think an agency is really, it's where I would go again if I started over today. What I like about agencies is that generally agencies have a number of different accounts, different clients. And so as a person on the creative team there, you get to move like a bee from flower to flower to flower to flower to flower, working on different accounts, different kinds of business, and keeps your brain flexible. And back when you and I were young things, we also, you noted this in a conversation earlier that, in-house agencies, I think I even had an old joke, oh, that's outhouse. It was just, you know what that was? I'll tell, on my part, it was elitism. Had I not been such an elitist, I would have steered a lot of kids to places that I've been to and I've visited. For instance, I gave a day-long series of seminars, basically all my lectures, to Low International Headquarters up in North Carolina. And I drove onto this, it's a campus. In-house agency, so large, it's a campus. And I met all these wonderful people who are there full-time, enjoying the shit out of their jobs, making money, buying houses, sending kids to college, and in an environment where in agencies, they grow and expand, they do this, and people get laid off. Oh, they're hiring, they're laid off, they're hiring, they're laid off. Unless Lowe's itself shuts down, you have this job security that you don't have when you're at an agency. So that's one place to go. But I'll also point this out. A guy named Bob Jeffrey of J. Walter Thompson said that agencies are no longer competing with other ad agencies. To quote him, now there's also Facebook, Google, Vice, Maker Studios, and a whole bunch of other content players we compete with. Anybody who makes content, and that's, I think, maybe the entire planet, is a possible job opportunity for you if you love writing, art directing, or making things. It could be Facebook, it could be Apple, it could be CBS, it could be the Colbert Show. Anywhere that makes content needs you. They need people who can tell interesting stories in an interesting way and put together things that are fascinating. Cameron Day, you're on the run from the law, but we all know that.
I'm allegedly on the run from the law.
Yeah. Did you have a question, young man?
I did have a question for you. First of all, I'm not going to go too fanboy on you, but I know so many people in this business who just absolutely adore you and had the pleasure of working with you. And one of them once told me a piece of advice you gave him that fundamentally changed the way he looks at solving problems. And what you told him is to be vulnerable. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't remember what it was, but I liked it. I said, whoever said that, geez. I didn't say that, but I do like it because what it speaks to me now is this. I taught copywriting for 10 years to a lot of smart students, but most students, and I mean most, I'd say 97% students sit down when I'm a copywriter and I'm going to write an ad, and they throw out their true voice and they throw out authenticity and they throw out you and me communications, and they go into this sort of business speak. I don't know, as if advertising is something other than communication. But they do start to write. Let me get my pen out here. I am a copywriter, and this is the wand of Odin. And now I shall uncrack it and amaze the world with my words. Shut the fuck up. Just talk. Just talk. Talk to the page. When you get stuck, talk to the page. It gets rid of all that forebrain nonsense, and I'm going to try to amaze you with my adjectives and adverbs. And it's you telling me something interesting. Oh, here's this product. It's really cool. Did you know it does this? Well, that's really cool. So that vulnerable quote, Kim, is how I think anything authentic. For instance, I think Volkswagen was vulnerable when it wrote its campaign in the 60s, when DDB wrote it. They knew they were an ugly car. They knew they were small. They knew they didn't look anything compared to Detroit's chrome yachts. And in that vulnerability, we heard authenticity. We heard it made us like them. If they can be this honest about how ugly they are, I can believe pretty much anything else they say. That vulnerability quote reminds me a little bit of that, Cam.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke.
So, Luke, my question is this, you have a chapter on, well, I'd say this first. As usual, this book is always aimed at sort of youngsters getting into the business, but it's full of wisdoms for old farts like me. And I find that yet once again happening in your content chapter. And you did a really good job of sort of solidifying the role of content and the importance of content and how it's actually better than most advertising now. And most commercials are horrible. I mean, they've gotten worse. They've not gotten better. I just love you to pass on some of those thoughts that are in your book for kids to get them to read this book, but also for anybody.
I like to think that I was there in the room when the first breakthrough of branded content happened. And I make a joke about it in the beginning of that chapter, how I say, advertising history was changed in my office at Fallon. Oh, no, wait, it wasn't my office. It was down the hall where the BMW team came up with BMW films, right? Honest mistake, really. It's just 2 doors down. Anyway, when they talked, BMW films just take their entire advertising budget, radio and collateral and posters and print advertising and television advertising, take all that money and plop it in a big bucket and go to Hollywood and hire the best directors they could to create, I think at the time it was 6 little 8-minute movies, maybe something like that. And it melted the burgeoning web back then, and servers clogged. It just shut down. Advertising has been interruption for all these years. You know, you and I, everybody here grew up with advertising. I'm trying to watch Friends, and then suddenly there's somebody there talking to me about an acne medication. That's interruption. I didn't want that. But content reintroduced advertising as destination, somewhere you would go. There's something so cool. So that requires branded content to be so cool that anyone would go look at this content. And what makes branded content at its best very cool is that it's interesting in and of itself. Whether I'm in the market for a BMW or not, with these directors that they hired, I forget the names. Well, one of them was Tony Scott. Got to see a little 8-minute film he filmed with Clive Owen being chased around in LA by some bad guys with Madonna sliding around in the back seat. That's just interesting, whether I'm going to buy a car or not. So again, content creation. It's when it's branded content, it's still an advertisement. You have to find the sweet spot between your brand's message and a great narrative that's just anybody would enjoy. Just a cool story. Nancy, you had another question, didn't you, earlier?
I love that you help the reader grasp in Whipple how important networking is to getting the job and to making connections that are going to help your career. Almost everyone avoids it. Nobody I know can't wait to go network. And it's something I avoided for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But, it's because, right, it's like, schmoozing. And we have, so many of us have it in our heads that it's this gross exchange. So considering the degree of aversion out there, I wondered if how you got past that ew factor, if in fact you also had to kind of push through it for other people to take some inspiration from.
Well, I didn't have to push through it because I was mentally unstable as a junior copywriter. I was insane. Let me put it this way. 10 years of teaching students how to improve their portfolios, how to make their portfolios, the About Me section is the one that just tips them all over. When it comes to talking about yourself, I think it's typical actually of many people in any industry. We're raised, most of us, to just, be interested in others and not to tout our own wares. But here we are, a copywriter. Now the product is me. How do I get rid of all my adjectives now and all my adverbs and just quiet down and say, yes, I can do that for you. Thank you very much. Here's my work. Look at it. It takes a certain amount of confidence and to get past that. And so kids, the same thing I tell them about a brand. First thing I say to do an ad for a brand is, what is the absolute truest thing you can say about that brand? Okay, now just do that for you. What's the truest thing about you? What's the truest thing about you? If you were on my team, I got to get Luke in here. He's always blinking. What's the truest thing about you? What do you bring most? If you were a character in a play, what would they say in that one italicized line after you? What do you bring? kids, I declined to hire a kid whose book I liked so much that I flew him out to the agency where I was at. And I flew another kid from the same school also out. And I happened to like one kid's book a little more than the other. But the kid that I interviewed first was a lump in a log. He just sat there and thought that his presence in my office was enough to express his interest in getting a job here. And he was a bump in a log. And I basically was talking to myself in a lot of one-syllable answers. And then I gave the job to the other kid who just showed up and was just their usual bad self and expressed an opinion and had a pulse. I later wrote to this other kid to say why, because he was a little bit amazed, and I said because I was about to perform CPR on you. You weren't there selling anything, saying anything. Why I should hire you, what you bring to the party, why you're excited, why you got into advertising, what part of advertising interests you the most. It's just there's no flavor. So part of it, Nancy, I think I would suggest to students is that you are no different than a new Bic pen with a nice tip that breaks more easily with no clumps. You're the product. You're the product. And if you can't get excited about that, what can you get excited about? Now, again, authenticity matters. So I don't want you to sell me a Bic pen is the best thing ever since the cave wall drawings. You just sell yourself authentically. What's the truest thing about you? And Nancy, if I was working for you there at Swim in some capacity, I would come and I'd say, I'd probably push that I'm a writer. I've been a writer all my life. I wrote in the college paper, in the high school paper. I've been doing cartoons my entire life. And I got from words and pictures into advertising and advertising. I loved radio the most because that's pure writing. And my favorite things in the world are my collection of Ray Bradbury first editions because I love the way old books smell. Now, in that little burst of stuff there, did I look like a complete asshole? I don't think so. Maybe our viewers will disagree. But you got a flavor of my passion. You probably convinced a little bit more that I've been doing this a long time and it matters to me. And as a writer, I'm also a reader. So that's how I would do it. Authentically, what's the truest thing about you?
My last question, Luke, is your book has, through all the editions, has a lot of really helpful, really interesting stuff, social media in this one. You talk a lot about content in this one, as we discussed. You talk about new ways to look for jobs, how to look for jobs, where to look for jobs. But one thing that I'm fascinated in is all the stuff that's actually stayed the same. Talk a little bit about what's still the same in the book and why it's still the same in the book.
I updated all the content, all the examples. So there's a couple of classics in there, but mostly it's just new, refreshed examples from the last year. But to your point, David, the first couple of chapters in the book, first 4 maybe, are the least changed because they are the basics of advertising, the blocking and tackling basics that you and I, everybody here, learned as a junior in the business or in school. What's new? There's some entirely new chapters. One on branded content is totally new. There's one on creative technology, which is now, as everybody knows, is now a fully paid position in most large agencies. In these chapter on social, an old chapter, but I added a remarkable amount of new stuff to it because I interviewed 2 brilliant people, Andrew Keller, who used to be from Crispin, he's now at Facebook, and a brilliant guy named Andrew Blood, also from Facebook, now retired, based down in Auckland. And these guys taught me a new way to think about social that I had not thought of before, how to build a brand ecosystem which is basically campaign architecture in the social media.
Well, I want to reiterate that as helpful as it is for young people getting into the business, it's just as relevant for anybody that's been in the business for 30 years.
Yep.
I agree. And a conversation Thomas and I had, probably a year ago is, I lived in absolute fear that it would be perceived that I was trying to rewrite your book. And Thomas basically said the same thing to me.
Well, I too had the same issue back in 1998. There were other books that weren't Ogilvy, but were kind of good. And I think what you find when you read Thomas's book, Cam's book, and Nancy's book, David's book, is what makes our products different beyond just the content is our voices. We all have different voices. And that's what makes, you and I, Cam, I think if we sat down, we'd probably agree on 99% of all subjects in advertising. So we would make probably a boring conversation, just admiring each other's acute observations of advertising life, but it's our perspectives and our voices that make our books different. Thanks everybody for all your questions, your interest in the book. Reminder our viewers, all of our books are available at Amazon and at actual real bookstores in what is often called meat space. I encourage you to go there, and thanks for listening.